Hello, welcome to the Thought Stuff podcast. Welcome to another weekly update. I hope you're doing well. It's a busy week just passed. It was the week of Microsoft Ignite, and that meant lots of announcements, lots of sessions, lots of new content, lots of things to dig into. And it's an interesting, again, the kind of continued evolution of what Ignite is and means. Obviously another virtual event this time around. Possibly the last virtual event we'll see that's entirely virtual for the Ignite series. Who knows? Not really sure. It's going to be interesting to see now whether they do another one in the spring or whether they hold off and try do like an in-person one in the fall for next year. I think we're just going to have to wait and see. So lots of announcements, lots of things to dig into, and I think I'm going to give you 6 high-level announcements from Ignite this week, and 5 of those are blog posts that I've done, so you can go and check out all the detail on my blog, and then the other one is kind of at the end, and I haven't done a blog post about this. I might actually do a video about it because I think it's quite interesting. So let's get into it. So first thing I think is worth drawing your attention to was the announcement that Azure Communication Services will GA their Interop with Microsoft Teams in early December. So I've talked about this a lot previously. So this is the thing that means you can have an Azure Communication Services client, which means it can run on a web browser, in a mobile application, doesn't need a plugin, doesn't need the Teams client to be present. But it can join a Teams meeting, a Microsoft Teams meeting. That's the only interop that's available at the moment, joining an existing Microsoft Teams meeting as a guest user. That's been in preview since, I can't really remember, Ignite March this year. So, so 6 months or something like that. It's been in public preview. It is now going to go GA in December. So not GA yet, but GA very soon. So that's exciting for anyone who is building solutions using that. And it's exciting, I think, generally for Microsoft Teams developers and development, and for Azure Communication Services. It's a great interop. It's a very exciting place to be, I think. It opens up a lot of interesting scenarios. So I've talked about this lots before. I spoke about it at South Coast Summit. I spoke about it at Commsverse as well. This interop, I think, is really interesting. Okay, equally big news actually, and related to that interop, equally big news was Microsoft saying that they now have their own all-in-one digital contact center. So that was said by a few people through Ignite, from the Dynamics side and from the Teams side as well. And so it's interesting to dig into this because Microsoft have never really come out and said we have a contact center before. They've always, they've got Dynamics, which is, like a contact management platform, a CRM system. They've got Teams, which is a communication platform. And they've never really put those two things together. And I think in part some of that is to do with partners. There's lots of partner contact centers. And this announcement doesn't take away from any of that. Microsoft very quick to say, there's definitely still a place for partners in all of this. But this is interesting. This is Microsoft saying, actually, if the needs align, if you're a heavy Dynamics user already and all you want to do is bring in voice into that mix, if you've got omnichannel for different channels already and you want to add voice calling, PSTN calling into that mix, well, now you can do that, and you can do all of that using Microsoft first-party software. So that's pretty interesting. It's done using the same technology as Azure Communication Services. So under the hood, it's all the same platform. Again, I've talked about this quite a lot throughout the summer, so you can go and check out some of those. I'm also speaking at European Collaboration Summit coming up at the end of November, so look out for that if that sounds interesting. But yeah, Microsoft have been sort of talking through this stuff for a while, and now they're ready to say, yep, we have a contact center, we have an offering in the contact center space, and I think that's going to be heavy. I think that's going to land very well with lots of, if you're very into Dynamics already, if your organization already runs on Dynamics, then I think this will be a really good thing for you. It looks pretty good. It looks pretty full-featured. It's got reporting in it. It's got a lot of AI stuff in it in terms of routing, in terms of suggesting sentiment analysis and recommendations for kind of next actions. It's got real-time translation. So there's plenty of things to look at. There's plenty to get stuck into. What was super interesting as well, and I put this in my blog post, that the image that Jared used in his announcement blog post showed video as the integration, not just PSTN voice. So that leaves open the door, if you like, for a future integration where that's done using video. So that would be web-based, I guess, or maybe not. Maybe you can just video call from a mobile application or something like that. Maybe you could, I don't know how you make a video call through WhatsApp video. Maybe I don't really know how that integration might work, but leaving open the door for doing that via video as well, which is again interesting. Opens up different kind of scenarios, different opportunities. So interesting news for Microsoft to come out and say they have a contact center. So you can go check out my blog post if you want all the detail. I pulled the detail in my blog post from a couple of different Microsoft blog posts. There were there were 3 different blog posts that I referenced in that. So you might want to go to my one and just get the kind of overview of what I think is important, and then dig into each 3 of the kind of the Microsoft ones as well. You can also sign up for a trial of the voice channel. That's the thing that's live now as well. All right, so I said it was a week of big announcements, and here's another one which would otherwise be the kind of front and center announcement on any other week. I think Microsoft announcing a new application for collaboration. So, what on earth is this? Well, this is Microsoft Loop, which Microsoft announced at Ignite last week as an application that will enable teams to think, plan, and create together. Now, if you thought that already was Microsoft Teams and you're a bit confused by this, you're not the only one, don't worry. Loop is interesting to look at, but it's not entirely new. So if you're familiar with Fluid Framework and the project that's been happening with Fluid, then this will be familiar to you. So Loop components are essentially Fluid Framework components. They're grouped together in Loop pages, and then you can also have Loop workspaces, which are kind of a bit more rigid and shared amongst multiple people. So you might have an admin set up a workspace that everyone collaborates in, or you might have users build up their own Loop pages. All of those things are built up out of Loop components. What are Loop components? They can be small things like these text boxes that are on the screen that people are kind of working with, a list that these people are working with. Can also be much larger things. You can have voting tables and status trackers. There's a big dynamics component that's a Loop component. That's quite interesting because it real-time updates to dynamics. So I've got some of that integration and real-time updating of data that Microsoft have previously spoken about. So kind of interesting. Sorry, I've got a really sore throat, so I'm going to try and keep going all the way through to the end, but I may give up. So I've got a blog post here that goes through all of this stuff. It is a bit confusing if you pitch it up against Microsoft Teams. I think the end game is that this comes into Teams. I think the end game here is that this comes into Microsoft Teams and becomes a part of it. And eventually, I don't know whether that Loop app will stay as a standalone app by itself, or whether it will just end up getting kind of ingested into the Teams beast and just become something on the rail, on the left rail inside Teams. Personally, I think that probably makes the most sense, but we'll see. Maybe there is a future where you run Loop and Teams as separate applications side by side. I think we're just going to have to wait and see. I'm not sure Microsoft particularly know all the answers yet. Either they're probably still waiting to see how people use it and how it's received. So, interesting. Something else I thought was kind of interesting and worth talking through was this. So Microsoft announced, one of the things Microsoft announced at Ignite that isn't anything to do with Teams and Teams development specifically, but is, I think, going to be of lots of use to Teams developers, is this thing called Azure Chaos Studio. So if you've heard of Chaos Monkey before, this is Netflix's idea, actually. Sorry, excuse me. Probably should have thought through talking for a solid 10-15 minutes with a sore throat and planned something better than a cup of tea to get me through that, but never mind. So Chaos Monkey was a Netflix idea. Really, the Chaos Monkey was this piece of software that would just go through the Netflix system and just randomly cause disturbances, turn off servers, pull out cables, make critical systems fail and stuff like that. The point was to make sure that developers wrote their code really defensively and really thought about every scenario and every eventuality. because that makes for much better code on the web, on decentralized networks. So something similar is coming to the Azure platform. So there's a thing called Azure Chaos Studio. So you'll be able to point your applications that are running in Azure and have Azure components at Azure Chaos Studio, and it will kind of insert random problems. So, secrets expiring, it will it's quite clever actually. It kind of, because it's an Azure native application, it kind of sits, it can kind of sit in between you and Azure. And so, for instance, if you are going to key vault for secrets or whatever, Azure Chaos Studios can sit in front of that and be like, oh, well, today's key vault isn't working, or it gives you a secret that's not valid, or it can sit in front of your interaction with storage tables and simulate storage outages and latency. So I think that's really quite clever, and it allows you to really test your application for all sorts of unusual events that are going to be they're really hard to replicate. And trust me, I know this. Like, this is what developers do day in, day out, especially enterprise developers. They worry and they fix bugs and they try and reproduce problems caused by 1 in 1,000 or 1 in a million events that people get seen out in the wild and then are really hard to replicate. And you rely on your own logging and your own systems and stuff you put into application insights to try and find. This is going to be game-changingly useful in uncovering some of those issues. So it's very cool. I'm very exciting. I can't wait to start using this actually. So I've written it up as a blog post. You can go and check it out. But Chaos Studio. I need to wrap this up before my voice completely goes. A couple of other things I should tell you about though. This one, Teams getting 3D mixed reality experiences. So this was first talked about back in March again with Microsoft Mesh, but now we're seeing the first fruits of what does that actually mean for, Mesh was great when it was announced, but it was really just an idea. What does it actually mean in practice? And we're seeing now those kind of people have worked through those ideas. Well, Mesh is coming to Teams. What does that mean? Okay, this is what it means. It means that sometimes if you don't want to do video, you can do virtual video, you can do avatar video, and it's more than just like an image. It moves, it reacts. If you like things, it will kind of do thumbs up. If you do heart, all those things that you can do in meetings, all those expressions and those emoticons, your avatar will kind of respond to as well, which is kind of really cool. And I think, I'm not really sure because we're going to have to wait for it to kind of come out and see, but maybe there'll be some stuff around like picking up on the way you're talking and your sentiment and whether you are talking at all, and it will animate around your mouth and stuff like that. So I'm excited for this. I think this is really interesting and really cool. I'm excited to see how it changes how we do meetings. Okay. Finally, this is a biggie, and I do need to do a video about this, I think. There's a new way of creating test data and Sandbox data for Microsoft Teams developers. So this is a big one, not my blog post. The dev blogs, it's massive for some reason, dev blogs blog post. And so let's just quickly rush through what this is. So there's always been the Microsoft developer blogs. That's been there already. What this is a way to get a fully populated environment with a bunch of users, a bunch of apps, a bunch of settings already set up. Things like a lot of data already there, a lot of mail data, calendar data. Excuse me. Other cool things as well, like sideloading turned on already, which is nice. So this is nice. This is really going to be useful for developers, because if you're like me, a lot of what you spend your time doing, you want to go and write a new application. The actual writing of the application is not the hard bit. The hard bit is all the setup-y stuff that has to happen as well. All the configuring the environment and getting it ready and getting the users sorted and doing all this sort of stuff. And I think this is really a good response from Microsoft to what is a really common problem for developers. So I'm loving this. I can't wait to try it. It comes with 25 users, 16 sample users, which is nice. So you've got the kind of 16 sample users, and then you can add on your the users that you're using for actual testing as well. They've all got E5 licenses. And I think this is really nice. It also, I should have said, like the Teams environment comes fully loaded. So there's Teams in there, there's channels and tabs and chat sessions all ready to go. So if you're writing applications that interacts with them, you haven't got to spend a whole lot of time making test data. So I love this. So I'm probably going to do a video about this because I think it's so cool. But that is 100% worth checking out if you're doing any Teams development today. And you are thinking about how to test what you have. You don't need to test it in production just to get realistic data. You can go test it in a proper sandbox. So 100% go check that stuff out. All right. I think that's everything from me. Thanks very much for persisting through my awful voice. And hopefully by next week, I'll be a bit more back to normal. I think a week of staying inside and staying away from people is probably a good idea. Anyway. Whatever it is you're doing this week, I hope you've managed to get a chance to get some Ignite sessions under your belt from last week. If not, they're all still on demand, so go check them out and kind of skill up on all the new stuff because there's some really exciting things happening. And have a great week, and I will talk to you again next time.